Welcome to the Museum of Museums. I'm your host, Ian Elsner. Museum of Museums is a tiny show about the way we display science, art, and culture. Each episode lasts less than 15 minutes, so let's get started. I'm sitting in a riverbed in Valencia, Spain, and my map displays an icon of a museum. I know the icon means museum because it has stately columns and a sweeping staircase. That's the shorthand for museum. But when I look up, I see buildings that don't look like the museum icon. These buildings are abstract mixes of concrete and glass, some that look like eyes, some that look like the ribs of a giant whale. These buildings are desperate to let you know that they are modern. Inside one of the buildings is an aquarium, inside another is a theater, and inside another is a science museum. I'm a big fan of museums looking less like the universal museum icon. The icon, though recognizable, brings to mind a stuffy collection, not the type of thing we want to have in an accessible 21st century museum. But the Prince Philip Science Museum in Valencia makes me uneasy with the way it looks. The building is too big for the space. The exhibits seem small and irrelevant next to the grandeur of the halls. I visited in 2003, and even though it opened in 2000, it looked old. The layers of paint around the concrete were shedding in the Spanish sun, and the glass windows fared no better. There weren't that many people in it. The museum and the buildings around it were designed by Santiago Calatrava, a Valencian architect who also designed the new World Trade Center Transit Hub in New York City and the stadium complex for the 2004 Olympics in Athens. Santiago Calatrava also designed a wing of the Milwaukee Art Museum. This building is just as daring as his Valencia work. It is just as desperate to be modern, but here in Milwaukee, it looks really good. It seems like an elegant entrance to a gallery. It invites visitors in from the streets over a pedestrian footbridge. What is the difference between the Milwaukee Art Museum and the Prince Philip Science Center in Valencia? They were designed by the same architect, and they were built around the same time. Why does one feel so perfectly appropriate, and the other one feel so extravagantly out of place? I have a few theories, but I'm not going to come to any conclusions. There are just too many factors, and the overall exercise is just too subjective. I am interested, however, in what the museum icon will look like in 50 years, and whether Calatrava's architecture might have an answer for us. Theory number 1. The Calatrava wing of the Milwaukee Public Museum looks better than its Valencian cousin because it is surrounded by other buildings of different architectural styles. There's a brutalist building and a modernist building right next to it, each housing some part of the Milwaukee Art Museum. The effect is an overall sculpture garden. Different architectural styles are each represented by the buildings themselves. In Valencia, by contrast, the Science Museum is surrounded by other buildings designed by Calatrava. This makes it coherent. But it's hard to get a sense of scale, and I think that's one of the contributing factors to the overall uneasiness. Theory number 2. The Calatrava wing of the Milwaukee Public Museum looks better than its Valencian cousin because it has reached a level of icon, while the Valencia project has not. The Milwaukee Public Museum logo is a stylized version of the building. It's almost the icon of the city of Milwaukee. Not every highway overpass requires an artistic statement, though maybe museums do. The buildings in Valencia do look iconic. For example, the theater looks like a giant eye. Get it? You're seeing the performance, you see. But none of them stand out in the way that a true icon does. Theory number 3. The Calatrava wing of the Milwaukee Public Museum looks better than its Valencian cousin because the interior space does a better job at its job. The Milwaukee Public Museum uses the Calatrava wing as an entrance and ticketing lobby, as well as a space for a few traveling galleries. By contrast, the Prince Philip Science Museum is everything, the exhibit hall and all the galleries. The exhibits have to be laid out with no cues from the architecture because there are no cues from the architecture. It's strange to walk through an exhibit where the ceiling is taller than you think it needs to be. There's plenty of criticism of the Milwaukee Art Museum, particularly about its cost. But to me, it seems like a good movement towards a new icon for a museum. It's a weird building that looks like nothing else on the skyline. Ah, that must be where the museum is. If that's the case, then the Calatrava architecture might have the answer, a weird, beautiful building that stands out. Maybe they are not the same in every city, but they are similarly weird. But it's also possible that in 50 years, the museum icon still looks the same. It will be an anachronism, but a useful one. It's like the icon for save being a floppy disk. Nobody uses a floppy disk anymore, but we all still need to save. Thank you for visiting Museum of Museums. We hope you enjoyed your visit. More information about the show, including pictures of the museums, can be found at ofmuseums.com. Follow us on Twitter @ofmuseums. Subscribe in iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. And please, leave a review.